We are live. So you don't get to see the chat window?
I see live. Yep,
All
and
right.
and I just got a little notification too.
Do you see like the people joining? Is that something you see? Hi
Yep.
everybody. By the way, there's people watching us. Katie and I are trying to figure out what she can actually see as a co-host versus what I see. I see people as they join. I see the number of people that have joined. Do you see any of that?
All I see is someone's joined. I don't see what you see, I think.
Oh, they try to keep it a big secret. Well, there's about 40 people right now, poor souls, poor unfortunate souls that are watching us. So we're going to get going in about 2 minutes here. So if everyone would just be patient. And Katie, I was gonna tell you kind of the way this thing tends to work, as I have noticed, is because you get all the metrics on the back end. When we do a Substack live, we'll get somewhere between 100 and 200 people that kind of tune in and see what's going on. A lot of them you can't tell because if you don't want to identify yourself, then it doesn't even show you in the count, right? You're like a secret observer. And then what happens is we take this and we post it. At least for my part on Substack. And and then like the last one I was looking up, the one that I did last week, we had about 1,700 people watch it after the recording when they could watch it at their own convenience. So, anyways, for those people just hopping on, we're going to be about another minute or so before we actually start going into the substance of this. But I appreciate you joining us. This is my little exercise, though. If some or more of you that are watching would hit the little heart button, that tells me that you can hear us. So, can you hear me? Then everyone's now looking, where's the heart button? Where is it? There we go. All right. We got some of those. All right. So now we want to know if you can hear Katie. So Katie, say something. And if you can hear Katie, do a little heart.
I'll say something amazing. Something amazing.
All right. So I think with all of that, we ought to probably get going, huh? Where is my
Fire
all
away.
these I have all these great notes and they didn't transfer over to my iPad, but that's all right. I'll get them right here. All right. So welcome to another round of So Does It Matter Live? I'm very, very pleased to have with me today my very good friend for a very, very long time, Katy Grimes. Katy is the editor in chief of the California Globe. And I say this knowing that it's probably hard to do, but Katy has written more on politics in the state capitol than I have. And I've written a hell of a lot on what goes on in the state capitol, but she writes with such frequency and stuff. So I like to say that Katy has forgotten more about state capitol politics than I'll ever know, and I know a lot. I don't know if she'll believe me when I say that.
That's absolutely true. There are days when I'm writing about something and I'll go, God, this seems familiar. Have I ever covered this before? So I have to Google myself, Google the topic and go, oh my God, I covered that 5 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what happens. I was just going through it, so I haven't. I'm one of the things that I've been busy doing on the backside is so I have accumulated over, I think over 8,000 posts that I did over the years on the Flash Report, and I'm in the process of having it put into a new tool so that you could go onto it and type in any subject and pull up anything I ever wrote over all that period of time. It will embarrass you too, because I've also integrating all of the posts from all of my contributors ever.
Thank
So some of your early work, for those people who don't know, Katy, at one time was the state capitol correspondent for the Flash Report website. It paid considerably less than what she makes now, which is to say it didn't pay anything, but it paid a lot in feel good and being able to promote the conservative cause. I'm sure her husband is much more appreciative of this gig, although I'm not sure that your husband really thought of these years as being the years where he was competing with your computer for your time.
Yeah, the laptop goes everywhere with me. We've had many lunches where I go, just got to do one thing.
Right. So okay, so let's let me start with the, I guess you call it the housekeeping, right? So welcome to Substack Live of So Does It Matter? This website is called So Does It Matter because every question that I ask before I write anything, because I don't want to bother anybody with stuff that doesn't matter, is so does it matter? And if the answer is yes, that means I ought to be writing about it because it's something that you ought to know about. This Substack is my effort to push back on a culture that has become driven by short tweets or X posts or posts on Instagram. And I try to write things, as does Katy, that are longer, more substantive, and explain three little letters that are really, really important for you to be able to be a part of what's going on. UHY. We not only talk about what's happening, we talk about the why things are happening. And so it makes Katy an awesome guest for our Substack Live today. Katy, why don't you talk just for a moment about the California Globe, even though I'm not sure how many people that ultimately watch this aren't familiar with the Globe, but give the elevator pitch for your publication.
Well, it's similar to the elevator pitch that I've been doing for many, many years. I have always covered stories at the Capitol, issues, policy, topics that the mainstream media either deliberately chooses not to cover or they choose to cover in a less than honest way. And so I kind of jokingly say that whether it was writing for the Flash Report or Old Cal Watchdog or now California Globe, we break a lot of news because really we're covering things that everybody needs to know, but the mainstream media does not cover or does not do it in depth the way we do. So with that said, we cover state house news. We cover the governor, the legislature. I attend hearings less today than I used to, but I still cover them. And we just try to make sure that California voters have all the information they need on, before they go to the ballot box, or if they discover that there's suddenly a new tax that they didn't know was coming down the pike. Whatever the issue is, we try to really drill down and give you the most important information.
Every day when I wake up in the morning, I go to certain websites. As a matter of fact, I promised somebody what I would actually do a column about the places I go so that people could know where I go to get news. Every morning, bright and early, I'm at the California Globe website, and it's one of the few sites that I check back on during the day because you guys keep stuff updated there. So, all right. So for our Substack Live today, we actually have some pre-planned topics that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk first about the current state of the California governor's race. We're going to talk about, we're going to talk about the billionaire tax proposal, which has now turned in signatures, or they've gathered enough signatures. I don't know if they physically turned them in. We're going to talk about high-speed rail and some news coming out of there that is not unexpected, but is very startling nevertheless. And no matter how low I set my expectations on how jacked up the high-speed rail program is for California, we always manage to exceed them. And then lastly, on our pre-planned list, we're going to talk about what's going on with Gavin Newsom, because he has most decidedly made a decision to go low profile here for a little while, but I don't think it's working very well. So we'll talk about that too. If he's not defining himself by what he says, he ends up being defined by the things that he does. So we'll have that conversation. So if you're enjoying this, the things that I would tell you, there's three things to do today that will matter for this. One is if you're watching it on Substack, right, to restack it, like it. We will post this up to YouTube so you can subscribe over there. And then you will also find this over on the California Globe. We're going to get it posted over there too. So make sure you're over there and signing up for their stuff. And they have a great alert that you can sign up for at the California Globe so that you get their news stories dumped right into your email box. So I recommend that you do that. All right. So let's talk about the California governor's race. Katy, did you watch the debate this week?
Yeah, I watched some of it. I wasn't able to watch all of it, which is why I used your article on our website about it.
Oh, well, there you go. My broad observations that I would quickly make about the governor's race, and people who read all my content, won't surprise any of them, is first and foremost, this race for California governor is really, really, really boring. And when I say boring, I mean like none of the what's the right way to say it? It feels like even though ballots are going to drop in less than a week, this feels like the campaign is where it should be like 9 months ago. Like there's no definition for anything, and so you've got other than Tom Steyer, who's busy, and we could talk all about Tom Steyer in a sec, but who's busy spending a vast treasury of money. I mean, when I say vast, last I looked, he's over $130. Like when I say $130, that means $130 million into his spending, and nobody's really gained any traction. This is going to be one of those races where, at the end of the day, somebody's going to end up being the governor of California, and we don't even know who it is.
I think probably what's so interesting about it is that there is still a 3% undecided.
It kind of depend. It kind of depends. It's even more pronounced than that. A lot of these surveys that are telling you how much each candidate has, they don't tell you that they're combining decided and what they call leaners. People that are like, well, who you supporting is question one, right? Now, then question number two is if you had to support somebody, if you had to pick one, who would you pick? And then that extra group of people, they become the leaners, the people that you force them to make a pick, but they haven't really decided yet. And so they do that and it drives down the undecided number because it really forces people to make a decision when they're actually undecided.
I think the undecided, though, tells us something that maybe we've not seen in this state in a very long time. And it is the one reason that cynical me, I'm not as cynical perhaps this year as I have been in the past because um, I really do believe there's a lot of Democrats and certainly a lot of independents who tend to vote Democrat in this state who are might not talk about it, but are pretty disgusted with how things have been going for them, whether, under Governor Newsom's administration, it's been a frickin' disaster, for
Of course.
almost and then you have that whole, there's a whole group of Democrats whose homes burned down in Pacific Palisades and Malibu and, the Eaton fire as well. And I think while those people may be looking to usher in a new mayor, there's a lot of them also that are really, really angry at Gavin Newsom and his administration. How that anger plays out to maybe more of a Democrat light that they're looking for, or if they could actually reach across the aisle and vote in a Republican. My glass is half full. I'm still holding out.
Yeah, my natural tendency, and call me a cynic, right, is hold on a minute. So Sue is saying sound. Can you hear me, Sue? I want to make sure everybody can hear us. It might be on your end. I guess we're going to ask for people hit your heart button again if you can hear me, and then we're going to keep going. If we've got a real sound problem, I want to deal with it. So can you hear me, people? Yeah, okay. We still got some hearts going on. So okay, we're going to keep going. So here's what I think is the biggest challenge, right? Is that right now you can't separate national politics from state politics. And so the biggest defining person in politics in America for the last decade is President Trump. There is no doubt that he defines whether you're for him or whether you're against him. And so my concern is that you may have Democrats who are disaffected and are unhappy about how things are going in California, but they're more unhappy with how things are going nationally and whether or not they're willing to support, the party of Trump as the alternative. I think that's it's a big challenge to be able to do that, and so we'll see what happens. Crossing the partisan divide is it's really hard, and I think there's a better case for it in a general election. If a Republican and a Democrat go on to November, don't get me going. That would be a very hard, because of math. Over
Exactly.
2 million more Democrats than Republicans, but at least then it starts to become okay, there's two people,
Yeah.
person A and person B, and let's weigh the differences between the two. But when you open up your ballot box and there's 40 candidates, and then you're trying to discern out of that 40 where are the 8 I've heard of, and then which ones are Republicans and which ones are Democrats. So I think it's going to be a pretty challenging situation. To preview a column that I have coming out this afternoon that will make some people unhappy, right? I have said from the get go that I thought the odds of 2 Republicans making it into the runoff and blocking out the Democrats was not very, very likely. The analogy that I make is imagine flipping a coin, and how many times do you need to flip a coin before it stands on its edge? And I'll even give you credit. Let's call it a silver dollar that's even got a flat edge to it, right? It's just very, very long odds that something like that is going to happen. But my bigger concern is, and I really started to worry about this when Swalwell flamed out so extraordinarily, is that I'm starting to worry about Republicans getting blocked out of the general election. Because in theory, what you wanted was Swalwell in there eating up 10, 12% of the vote, not blowing up and dropping to zero, right?
Yeah.
Because now that leaves the consolidation. So even on the latest polling that we're seeing this surge from Becerra, and we could talk about him in a minute. I want to talk about Becerra and Steyer in a sec. I really want to talk about them. But, he's gone up in the polls lately. And then and then and then on top of that, Steyer is still pretty far up there. So you've got this situation where if Steyer, man, if Hilton can't consolidate higher, Steyer goes above him, and then suddenly we don't have a candidate for November. And and again, I write about it this afternoon. We need a candidate for governor who is a Republican. Yes, the odds of winning the governorship are slim, not zero, but the impact on competitive congressional races, competitive state Senate races, competitive assembly races, races up and down the state this November for supervisors, city council, school board. It's a whole lot harder to motivate Republicans to vote if they're like, we don't even have a candidate on the general election ballot. My choices are battery acid or rat poison. Why would I go vote? Right. And so I think it's really, really, people are going to have to make some fundamental decisions at some point about whether or not they want to have Republicans consolidate to make sure there's someone in the general, or whether you want to even it out. And it could be that the even point ends up standing too low. Anyways, I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I am asked all the time, what is it going to take for California to change? And my answer, probably for the last 10 or 15 years, has been when Democrats are sick of the crappy public schools that their kids go to also, and the crappy roads that our transportation dollars are stolen from and go into the general fund, and, the anti-law enforcement mentality of the Democrats. I mean, we can go on, the water policy,
Oh, it's awful. It's awful.
all of it. So when are Democrats sick of that? Because that's the only time something's going to change.
Yeah, it used to be people would say when they run out of money, there's just so much money in California that you just wonder if it's going to run out. So I think that we should talk about Becerra because it's been very odd to me, right? And you want to put stock in surveys, and I don't want to be a cynic, but talk about somebody coming out of nowhere, and I'm not sure why he came out of nowhere and what's going on with that. And it seems to me that, and maybe you can, Katie, you can critique me here. I feel like when you look at the Democrat field of candidates and we exclude Tony Thurmond, the CTA bitch who really has no place being in this race, although he's funny, right? I find him to be funny. He's absurdly funny because he's so not relevant that
Right.
when he's dropping F bombs in his ads, like who really cares? If a tree falls in the forest and nobody's there, did it make a noise? And Villaraigosa is just at such low numbers. And ironically, with all of the money that they're spending, I mean, Matt Mahan is still, going nowhere. And I think it's because he has no lane. I don't
Yeah.
think these are the most partisan times that we've ever been in. And I don't think there's a bunch of Democrats that are interested in Democrat light. At least it doesn't seem like it. Although you could have somebody who was more moderate in their philosophy, but not moderate in their temperament. And this
Yeah.
guy is moderate in both. So this is kind of a guy like imagine that your job is you believe in oatmeal, right? And you could have two ways of selling your oatmeal. One way would be like, let me tell you about my fantastic oatmeal. Let me tell you about all the things it does, why it's needed, why having this oatmeal is going to make you stronger, better, fatter, all the things that make oatmeal great. And you're kind of like, wow, I never really thought about oatmeal, but he's really done it. Or you've got the Mahan technique. Let me tell you about the nutritional aspects of oatmeal and why, if you eat the oatmeal, it's going to have a fundamental impact on your demeanor, on your hygiene. And let me never let my pulse go above 60. And so, what you've got is a combination of moderate in philosophy relative to the other Democrats, I should say, but also moderate in temperament. So you're just kind of like, what the hell? Nothing that he wants to do is exciting, and nothing that he says and the way that he says it is exciting. And I know there's a big IE out there with millions of dollars to try to help this guy. But at the end of the day, I'm always reminded because these IEs, independent expenditures, they're legally prohibited from coordinating with a campaign. So they can't do a commercial where they go, come on down, we're going to film a commercial of you. Here's your script. And oh, by the way, we're going to hit you with a stun weapon right beforehand and freak you out so you actually have some energy, right? All they can do is lift video from speeches that he gives
Yeah.
where he talks like this all of the time. Let me just tell you, I know how to govern the city of San Jose, and we've done this and we've done that. It's not very exciting. Oh,
And I'm not, he's not as moderate as he tries to portray himself. And I'm telling people to, look up somebody's record, please. It doesn't take that much. But yeah, coming off very, very blah and, just kind of too milquetoast, I think, for most voters. Actually, he's campaigned kind of the way Republicans often do.
right, exactly. So we end up with Steyer and Becerra at the front of the pack right now, and it just seems to me that again you've got Becerra, who I think represents kind of the status quo in Sacramento. I don't think he's much of a change agent. I mean, the only difference is, Newsom from time to time, not often, but from time to time, because he's so self-consumed with
Yeah.
his ego, does some things where you kind of go, I wasn't expecting him to do that, but okay, he had a sane moment.
Yeah.
I don't think Becerra's got any sane moments in him whatsoever, and I think that he will continue to the extent that Sacramento is governed by political corruption with this deal where the unions spend millions of dollars electing people, and then in return, the office holders use public policy to drive millions of dollars to the unions. Becerra is the continuation of that. Nothing changes with him.
Don't know what I can add to that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the only odd thing though is that of course he's not really been endorsed by any unions. So I don't and I think that has Steyer's getting more union endorsements, and I would think if I were the unions, that guy's freaking crazy Ivan, right? I mean,
Yeah, he's so unpredictable. I also think he's extremely unlikable. His campaign ads they're bordering on offensive. I don't see how he's certainly not attracting the individual voter that way, but if what he wants is the union endorsements and the union money, then his ads don't matter. But
yeah, our guest Drew Hayes says that Becerra is the California Biden.
yeah,
That's what, and there's some truth to that.
yeah, he another blah. I think he's just trying to appeal to the fringiest of the fringe left right now. Becerra is just to try to solidify his position. I got a tip. One of my capital sources told me that Gavin Newsom is probably going to back Becerra for a couple of reasons. One being that Becerra won't ever show him up. So as Gavin's looking to fix Pennsylvania, have to worry about Becerra outshining him or
Right. Well, and he wouldn't have to worry about. I mean, if it's Steyer, right, Steyer is going to be like Newsom's trying to define his candidacy, and Steyer every day is being batshit crazy. There's certainly no doubt that Becerra is much more moderate in his temperament than Steyer. Steyer's, I mean, have you ever seen Steyer when he's not huffing and puffing and his cheeks are red and he's hyperventilating and hyperbolic all the time? So yeah, well, we'll see what happens. Right now, I'm sure he's got to be very frustrated because he is spending so much money and he's, not leading in the polls right now. So we're gonna see what happens. So yeah, we'll see how this goes. We're gonna shift topics here because and let me just say, one last thing. I don't know. I assume that a lot of our guests saw the debate, and as I put in my commentary, the big loser of the debate was the format. This is the second time we've had a format that has been terrible. The first go around, it was too short and disjointed. And then the second go around, the first round of answers was 30 seconds, please. 30 seconds, and then 45 seconds. And then we got the invasion of the bossy moderators who I don't mind a moderator that says, if you're going to talk over somebody, we're going to cancel your mic. Okay. But I bet that moderator got more speech time in than some of the candidates in her segment. And it was pretty outrageous. And so my advice, and so if you're a premium subscriber for my Substack, I said this in a video yesterday, but my suggestion to the folks over at CNN, right, they're going to be hosting the next debate next week. And I think that the better debate format would be about 3 rounds of this. Each candidate is asked a question and has 2 minutes to respond, not 30 seconds, has 2 minutes to respond. And the moderators I think it is a good idea to tailor the question per candidate to go after where candidates have been evasive and all that. And then followed by a 1 minute response from a candidate who doesn't know they're giving the response until they're called on. So you get kind of a little bit of instant. It's not like, okay, this response is from Chad Bianco. And when it's over, Xavier Becerra, get ready because you get a 1 minute response. It's more like everyone's got to be ready with their response. And then, okay, it's Becerra. And then each time you do that, so it rotates. Everyone's going to get a 2 minute and everyone's going to get a 1 minute. And you could do that 3 times. And now, not like 2 minutes is that much time to talk about what you do in housing policy in California, but it sure as heck beats 45 seconds.
yeah,
But
and
I don't know if CNN will do that.
it looked like more of a debate for sure. I also think just kind of to put a final thought on, it would not be for Javier Buccaria, as Biden called him, Becerra, because he who debates does not think very well on his feet. And I think that's become really evident. It doesn't mean he's disqualified for, the job. Not everybody thinks quick on their feet. But I think a tougher debate formula like you're talking about would flesh out some of the lesser candidates.
Yeah, 100%.
Mm.
100%. So, and then, yeah, so we'll see what happens. We're going to move on to topic 2 now, which is the billionaire tax proposal. Proponents have announced that they've gathered like 1.5 million signatures. I assume they've turned them in. If not, they're doing it shortly. I assume they're in. And so it's very, very likely we're going to see this on the November ballot. I guess it's important to remind everybody there is an off ramp. They changed the law some years ago so that there is an opportunity for negotiation and to negotiate something off the ballot.
Mhm.
So I don't know what those negotiations would look like. I don't know what so the particular public employee union that put the billionaire tax on the ballot that spearheaded it and paid for the significant costs of signature gathering was the SEIU sub-union, like the Western Healthcare Workers Union. These guys are I don't even know how to say this. So a lot of the people in SEIU are batshit crazy. And so that union is batshit crazier, right? They're really, really extreme, progressive, left-wing ideologues that run that union. And so they came up with this idea. So I don't know what a compromise looks like, but assuming that it goes to the November ballot, it's going to be a big dust up and I think I wrote about this, but I think that the two biggest vulnerabilities in this ballot measure, as it's been written, number one is that it has been written with language to specifically say that once the voters have approved the billionaire tax, that or and when we say a tax, it's this confiscation of 5% of wealth. Once it has passed, the legislature can expand that confiscation power to apply to anyone they want in the state of California with a 2/3 vote without ever going back to the public again. And so, if there's a way to coherently express that to voters that you're being asked to take away your safeguard, your ability to have a vote in the future if the government's going to try to tax your property, that's, I think, a problem. And then the other piece that's built in here is I don't even know if you know this, Katie, but under one of the provisions of this measure, every single person that files their state taxes is now required to make like a statement under oath or whatever, or under penalty of perjury as to their net worth, or at least certifying that their net worth is not, sufficient to require them to have to cough up 5% of their net worth.
Yeah.
Telling you, Katie, once you create this department of confiscation, they are gonna it's gonna take them 2 seconds to figure out, well, okay, there were only 150 of these billionaires. We got them or we're fighting them. They have lots of lawyers. We need to go after the people worth 100 million. No, there's not enough yet. We need to go after the people that are worth 10 million. And the cascading effect of chasing out all of these people of means to other states, you're smoking dope if you think that these people that own these big companies have moved out of state and they're not ultimately going to move their companies with them.
Well, absolutely. It's just going to expedite it for sure. Really, all this is a tax on assets. That, for billionaires, as we initially wrote about this proposal, was, a billionaire with a incredible house somewhere and has designer furniture and art and, Ferraris and Maseratis in the garage. Those are all assets. This is a tax on their assets, not just their income.
Right.
And that will trickle down. So pretty much anybody who owns a home in California is looking at eventually being a part of this tax.
Yeah. I think it's also significant to note with a whole bunch of these billionaires, these are people that are, I won't say cash poor, but relative to their net worth, they're cash poor because their net worth is in the companies that they have. And so if you supposedly somehow all of a sudden need to come up with a $70 million to pay your tax bill, but you have $10 million in cash and the rest of it's in your company. You're under this, you would be forced to liquidate your ownership or part of your ownership in your company in order to come up with the money that you need to pay this. And so it's pretty ridiculous.
And that's why I stress this is on the assets. This is not on, your bank account. It's people are going to be forced to liquidate some of their net worth in order to pay these tax bills. And that's what's so crazy. A lot of people create family wealth through real estate. Well, if I'm getting taxed on my cabin as well as my house, the cabin's probably going to have to go at some point. So this we need to do our best to convey this to the voters because this is going to be sold as an us versus them thing. How
Right.
dare who have all these assets live like that while the rest of you are suffering. And that's really what's
I think the other argument that is going to be persuasive is, if you appeal to the cynicism of voters, do you really think that any of the money that comes from this is going to go to you?
yeah,
Or is
that
it really just going to end up going to all the special interests and anybody but you? I do think in terms of strategies to defeat it, it's interesting. Obviously, there's the very direct strategy, which is going to voters and explaining to them why they should vote no and why this is a bad idea. But then there's the counter strategy that's being advanced by one of the factions of billionaires, which is qualifying multiple ballot measures for November with the idea that if you can pass something with more votes than the billionaire tax, and it has language in it that stymies the implementation of the billionaire tax, that's another way to go after it. So those measures are out there for signature right now, and I think you're going to see that strategy being deployed as well. All I can say is that, if you're looking at real impact on our state budget, we already have a situation where the super wealthy are responsible for way too much of the state's income. And it has created this massive pendulum swing back and forth, depending on when are capital gains at a good time to be, when is the economy right for people to cash in and take capital gains? And then all of a sudden you have a bunch of extra money going into the state. And then you get periods of time where it's not good. And then the state like now runs a structural deficit. And this kind of public policy only makes the situation worse. So
exactly.
anyways, let's talk about high speed rail. And I'm going to punt this over to you to kind of set the table for everybody who's watching, because there's been a lot in the news in the last week, especially about high speed rail.
You broke up on me.
Sorry about that. All right. So basically, I'm turning it over to you to drive this conversation. I kind of drove the billionaire tax conversation. I was going to turn it over to you to talk about the high speed rail and what's going on.
Oh, good Lord. Um, this has been a thorn in my side for a lot of years, frankly, going back to the ballot initiative in 2008. But right now, what's fascinating earned that from $33.5 billion to build this supposed LA to San Francisco track for high speed rail up to 231 billion. And that's just what we know of. Obviously, there's a lot of lawmakers, mostly Republicans, saying this thing needs to be scrapped. Fortunately, some Democrats agree with that. And yet I actually heard someone top of the hour news today, I think it was ABC, saying, but they employ so many people now. And that's what I've been calling it all along. It's nothing more than a jobs program. It's
Right.
been amazing, but it's just a union jobs program and a full employment program for consultants. It's so out of control at this point. I mean, I have, as I said, covering this thing, I'm quoting myself in articles from 2011, from 2012, that right out of the chute, they started violating what was in Proposition 1A. And to this day, it's like the legislature could scrap it. They could have held them accountable, all
Yeah.
along.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. People need to stop thinking about this as the goal is to actually create high speed rail going from Orange County to San Francisco, because that's not what this is. It's what it purports to be. This is a jobs public works program whose purpose for the unions is to employ union members. So it's the journey, not the destination. So they don't care about overruns. They don't
Yep.
care about how long it takes because they really want to be building it forever. And it's completely insane what's going on. My favorite story of this week is, because I hadn't heard about it before, was the Cesar Chavez Memorial Detour story, which is just absolutely nuts. And correct me if I get this wrong, but they decided to route the right of way and kind of the track where the track would go for high speed rail. If you went on a straight line, you'd go right through some park that's dedicated to Cesar Chavez. The irony, of course, is at the time they did this, Chavez had not blown up. But so they changed the route to go around the park, and they are literally reported in the Chronicle that this was $1 billion workaround to go around the park. $1 billion. But again, it's $1 billion spent on all of these union jobs to build this track to nowhere. And so every time I read about the high speed rail, I go on to X and I post a photo of something being built for the high speed rail and the Great Pyramid. Because
Perfect.
all it is a bunch of, except they're not slaves, right? I guess it's not really a good analogy, because
Okay.
it's just well paid people working on a project in the middle of well, with all due respect to the people who live there, relative to where the population centers are in California, the middle of nowhere, going back and forth. And it's this eyesore. And then you just know that there's entire people that have now grown up and all they can remember is seeing all this cement and all this concrete, and then, I mean, the whole thing is completely ridiculous. And then what was the dollar amount figure now that they've said that it's going to cost, Katie?
131.
$1 billion to finish the high speed. I mean, can you even imagine, with that kind of money, you could pay for single payer healthcare for a whole year.
It is absolutely asinine. And I think what bothers me the most is that the California legislature, going back to 2010, 2011, has just abdicated its responsibility over this, which tells me there's collusion here. This was the plan all along. It's a big, big gift to the labor unions. And nobody wants to be the one to say it's gigs up.
Yeah, and I can use an example because I like to talk about this all the time. California's got this. This is where I talk about the collusion between the environmental nutcases and the public employee unions. Because we could talk about the state's got this. It used to be called Cap and Trade. Now they've nicknamed it to be Cap and Invest. But it's really a program where we're going to artificially restrict the amount of carbon emissions that you can have, these larger carbon emitting companies. And then you have to kind of like buy more credits on an exchange. They basically monetize pollution, I guess you'd say, right? And so they force you to pay. And so the enviro freaks like it because it just flat out reduces carbon emission because it makes it too expensive to do business. Shut down the carbon emitting businesses, right? But the unions like it because every year, 8 figures of spending, at least eight, well, at least, yeah, 8 figures of spending at least. So 9 figures of over $1 billion a year goes straight from the money from this program into the public works project called the High Speed Rail Boondoggle. And so literally it's a redistribution of wealth while at the same time making California less affordable. I mean, you couldn't make up more. I mean, and by the way, none of this stuff is changing if Becerra or Steyer get elected. Matter of fact, Steyer wants to double down on everything. That guy, like I said, the guy's, cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. And then I guess the last thing I saw on the high speed rail that's worth mentioning because I thought it was crazy is I guess there's this new plan that they've introduced that they want the High Speed Rail Authority board to approve. And the board's balking at it because, there's not enough. They're fundamentally changing it, making it shorter, changing the routes. And they haven't really made it clear in their new plan what that even looks like. Because, of course, they don't want to actually put into print. Oh, by the way, our new improvements to the system are that we unimprove the system, that it's no longer going to go to the places that we said it would go. So the whole thing's just a big nightmare. And I can tell you now that this is going to come up over and over again on the campaign trail for Gavin Newsom because Gavin Newsom's arrival to the corner office came after high speed rail was voted on by the voters, after Jerry Brown tried to really push it, but he has picked it up on steroids. And I think it's all about the union, which, by the way, look at this is not rocket science. When the governor wanted to do Prop 50, where did the lion's share of money come from? Oh, governor, this is your next big thing. Here's your money. And in case anybody hadn't noticed the pattern here, when the recall attempt against Gavin Newsom took place in 2021, when it was over, guess what? Gavin Newsom kept millions and millions of dollars in the bank. He didn't spend it all because that recall never really had a shot. There's enough Californians to qualify recalls, but not enough Californians to actually recall. And then Prop 50. They raised a record amount of money for Prop 50 and left tens of millions of dollars in controlled committees of Gavin Newsom unspent so that he would have a slush fund to be able to spend things on. And maybe that's a great transition to our final topic today, which is Gavin Newsom, right? Gavin Newsom has really, at least for a couple weeks anyway, which is an eternity in Gavin Newsom time, it's really low. His profile's gotten a little bit lower. I mean, I saw where he and the first partner were in the Central Valley dedicating some new state parks. But really, compared to how he's been in the news lately, what's he been doing, Katie? What has Gavin Newsom been doing the last couple of weeks?
Nobody really knows. I think that they as a couple and the first partner as his wife were getting a lot of really bad press. And I think probably consultants swooped in and said, let's go dormant for a little while. Let's do friendly husband and wifey things, act like a first lady, first partner. And so, yeah, dedicating parks.
Yeah.
He's out pitching his book.
Yeah, I bet the conversation went like this. Governor, you do a great job out there on the trail, but your wife is off the rails. She's
Yeah.
out at San Quentin talking about how the inmates there probably didn't intend to kill their victims any more than she had intended to accidentally cause the death of her older sister when they were tiny. She's out there talking about fragility, about raising boys to play with dolls. I mean, she's off the deep end. And I almost wonder at some point they just kind of were like, Governor, we need you to kind of spend some time with Jennifer and have Jennifer stop this, right?
Yeah. That's what I think this is about. And the fact that he hasn't endorsed anybody in the next governor's race is a little bit telling also. So yeah, I think he might have millions or billions of dollars as in his war chest for various and sundry things, including his run for president. It
Oh,
still
sure.
doesn't change Gavin Newsom. And every time he opens his mouth, he inserts his foot. And if he doesn't do it, his wife does.
Yeah, with both feet of hers. So I have to put on my glasses now because I'm getting old and I can't read without them. But I figure you guys deserve a rant. So I got to go off on this book thing, right? The Young Man in a Hurry book that he wrote that is, all about the difficult upbringing that he had. But, I don't know if people noticed, but so one of the committees that benefited from all of this money is an outfit called the Campaign for Democracy Committee. So it's a committee that's one of his committees, and they spent $1.5 million of donor money buying 67,000 copies of
Yep.
his book. I'm going to repeat that again. Of the nine, maybe I'll add to it. Of the 91,000 copies sold, 67,000 of them were bought by his own pack. When this news came out, the New York Times, they're famous for their bestseller list, right? Well, did
Yeah.
you know that the bestseller list, when they find out that somebody's bulk selling their books or bulk buying their books, they go and they put it's like literally a little dagger mark that they
Yeah.
put next to that person to indicate that they're goosing their own sales of their book. And by the way, I'm be the first one to admit Gavin Newsom did not invent this. Other politicians have used their campaigns to buy books before, but he's the most recent. And like all things Gavin Newsom, he's doing it in an infinitely more high profile way. But let's ask this question, and I'd have to ask some of my friends who have written books and gotten them published. But every time you sell buy a copy of the book, whether you're buying it from the publisher or whether you're buying it off of Amazon, who gets a portion of the sale price of that book, Katie?
The author.
Yes, the author. And so I think there needs to be some public, understanding of how much of a wealth transfer took place. So the unions put the money into the Campaign for Democracy Committee. The Campaign for Democracy Committee spends $1.5 million to $1.6 million buying 67,000 books. And let's just, for rounding purposes, say that these books each make him $5.
Yeah.
All right. So you buy 67,000 books and $5 from each book goes straight into the Newsom family treasury. Well, that's 67,000 times five. And Rex Frazier's watching and he's got his calculator out, but he's a lawyer, not a mathematician. But he would tell you that that is the better part of $500,000 going into the pocket of the Newsom family. And, that's literally handing wealth. I mean, it's almost more blatant than their funding of the nonprofits that pay Jennifer. And it's
Right.
more lucrative than they do it, right? And so it's completely crazy. It's ridiculous. And this is one of those things that came out during his recent hiatus. So I think, frankly, that the market system ought to take care of itself. And I don't know what's going on with Kamala Harris and Pete Buttigieg and all of these people, Shapiro, but they all ought to be asking, how much did Gavin make when he bought his own books? I think that's a fair question to ask.
I wrote about it also and concluded that when it comes to Gavin Newsom, this particular buying all these books appears to be personal profit, self promotion, donor funded campaigning. But as I say, always on someone else's dime. I'll bet you that guy hasn't had to reach in his pocket for his wallet in years.
I mean, ask yourself this question, and then I promise I'll stop obsessing on this topic. But okay, you've now bought 67,000 books. So let's assume you got two things going on here. One, you got to have a way to get them to people. So does that mean that you've taken possession of 67,000 books, and so now on top of the money to buy the books, you've got to package and book them? Or probably more likely, I wonder if you just get a strike a deal with Amazon. So now all these books are being shipped. Who is getting 67,000 flippin' books? Now I can guess that about 4,000 of them are going to the likely delegates of the 2028 Democrat National Convention, right?
It
But
was
after you get past that, who are, who are you sending that many books? I could tell you he didn't send me one.
I
Governor, you did not send me a copy of your book. I haven't got it. I've read articles about it. If you send me your book, I'll read it. So he has not sent any copies of the book. Then Drew here says that the books cost $22 a piece. So I bet my $5 number is low. It might be $10. It could be the better part of $1 million into their pocket. I mean, it's just nuts.
how the news. It's
But like literally, I mean, I guess I wouldn't know, but I guess if you went to every one of his donors, maybe he's mailed them all a book, and that's a lot of donor. Anyways, maybe he sent one to every member of the legislature. He's probably sent one to every member of the media. Maybe he's sending them to the state legislators from the early voting states. I don't know. I mean, it's nuts. So, anyways, I guess we're at the point of this where I would just tell people as we kind of finish up here, Katie and I are happy to take a question or two if you want. I have found, Katie, that our audience tends to be shy, except for Drew and Scott Piotr. And so I don't know if they have anything that they particularly want us to talk about. If not, I'm going to finish up this little conversation about Gavin Newsom by saying, look for him to reemerge again. He's narcissistic, and he does not like being out of the public view and out of the public eye. And I do think that you're right. I could see him weighing in and endorsing a candidate. I really could. And if he did endorse a candidate, it would have to be Becerra. Do you remember? Your memory is better than this on I am. Was Becerra I think he was an appointed attorney general. I think that Kamala Harris went on to become a U.S. senator. And I think this guy got appointed by Gavin Newsom to fill out the remainder of the term.
think
Or
Jerry
or am I off wrong? And that was Bonta. So this
Jerry
preceded even that. So did he run for attorney general at the same time as Jerry Brown then? He wasn't an appointed attorney general?
was appointed by Jerry Brown to fulfill. It was either, yeah, I think it was Jerry Brown when Kamala Harris was elected. I cannot remember if he actually ran another campaign for attorney general or picked by the Biden administration before he had to run another campaign.
Right, I'm looking it up right now since our lame readers aren't helping us here. Was Becerra appointed AG? Let's see what. Sorry, not all of you are lame. Only the people who know the answer to this. So Becerra was appointed Attorney General in 2016 after Harris was elected to the U.S. Senate, right? And then he ran and was elected in 2018. By the way, it's worth mentioning how embarrassed it takes a lot for me to be embarrassed for someone that I don't respect. But I will tell you, when Becerra got in the debate with the moderator I don't know if you saw that portion, but I mean, obviously Becerra has no policy chops at all when it comes to understanding issues surrounding property insurance, like none at all. Like my 18-year-old son who doesn't know anything about it would be able to game this out better than him. But then also for him to be the former attorney general of California and to understand the law, understand that there's already been specific precedents set here by court decision, and to just kind of settle it. He basically said, well, I don't know if I'll be successful or not, but I'm going to do it. He sounded like a little petulant child. So I actually felt bad for him, and it takes a lot for me to feel bad for somebody like that. Anyway, my broader point was in talking about him was that this guy was not ready for prime time. So, um, anyways, Rose Marie reminds us that Becerra, as Attorney General, one of the more insidious powers of an Attorney General is the title and summary of ballot measures, and he's the one who put a favorable explanation on the gas tax measure at the time. By the way, that wasn't the only thing I can't. The number of bad ballot measures that he helped doesn't even stack up to the number of good ballot measures that he killed in the cradle. So, anyways, we are bordering up on an hour, Katie. So I think we have probably exhausted our goodwill with the people that are watching. But I appreciate everyone for participating. The two things that you can do to help us the most, one would be to like this post when you see it live. Another one would be to hit the heart buttons right now, because that affects the algorithms and tells the people at Substack that you guys were with us today. And then they go, hey, we like that. So with all of that, look for the look for the entire version of this to show up on my site. And I think it's going to be posted up over on the California Globe. And feel free to share either one of those around and get more eyeballs on this. And I appreciate it very much. Katy, thanks so much for spending time with us. Katy won't tell you, but I asked her yesterday. So she had 1 day's notice. So
That's
really
all right.
appreciate it.
Always good to talk.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.